quickly. Settle down.
Paris, spring of 1953, almost 10 years after liberation. Flags of many nations stand in harmony at the Palais de Gilles. A general, chairman of the American Joint Chiefs of Staff, arrives to take part with other world leaders in a program of peace based on a union of Western strength, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Soft-spoken, honest in his opinion, to his intimates he is known simply as Brad. To everyone else he is Omar Bradley, the soldier, the GI's general, the personification of a great army, a great nation. With all that he stands for, this man has no sense of haughtiness in his makeup. He never had it. Even when he moved along the broken paths of mankind's greatest war, he moved as a soldier, with a soldier's determination. Bradley, the strategist, perhaps the greatest in modern warfare. Bradley, the man of quiet dignity. But he had a punch that packed a terrific wallop. He smashed ahead with a force of almost 1.25 million men. No American general had ever exercised direct field command over so many combat troops. At war's end, he visited Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountain retreat, and there he reflected on his accomplishment. With a soldier's determination, Omar Nelson Bradley had won a brilliant campaign. He had come a long way, this general, geographically and otherwise, from the heart of America, Missouri, home of Mark Twain, General John Blackjack Pershing, President Harry Truman. He was to serve as general under not one president, but 3. In addition to Truman, seen here at Potsdam, Germany, there was Dwight D. Eisenhower, his former wartime chief, as well as Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In 1893, on Lincoln's birthday, in a home 50 miles from the Missouri River, Omar Bradley was born into the family of a poorly paid country school teacher. In country such as this, he learned to fish, hunt quail, and became an expert marksman. He was an only child, and young Omar idolized his father. To supplement the family budget, the elder Bradley did some farming. From such roots, the boy learned the meaning of patience. Bradley was only 14 when his father died. After high school, he tried his hand at a number of endeavors. He sold newspapers and worked at the Wabash Railroad shop for 17 cents an hour. But a Sunday school teacher suggested West Point, and West Point it became. Here, he studied Lee, Grant, Pershing. The class of 1915, Brad's class, was to produce 56 generals. One could say of Bradley, he is as quiet as the Hudson, a trait that was duly noted by his class biographer, who wrote, "True merit is like a river. The deeper it is, the less noise it makes." This was Bradley, and they wrote further of him, "His most prominent characteristic is getting there." It was a remark that would prove truly prophetic. In World War I, Omar Bradley commanded an infantry company at the Butte, Montana copper mine. His own evaluation was that he had been passed over, left out of the fight. In 1920, he was ordered to West Point as an instructor of mathematics. From 1924 to 1939, Army schools. Routine duty periods with troops in the United States and Hawaii, then on to the General Staff in Washington. Finally, in the early part of 1941, Commandant of the Infantry School in Fort Benning, Georgia. Was he getting there? Well, he was acquiring a reputation as a fine infantry officer. There wasn't a thing these men did that Bradley couldn't or wouldn't do himself, for he had great physical endurance. By February of 1943, Bradley was in Florida training a division for overseas duty. The U.S. had been involved in the Second World War for over a year now, and this time Bradley was to be included in the fight. Word finally came to report to French North Africa. For the first time in 32 years as a soldier, Bradley was off to war, selected by Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall, who had been watching this great infantryman for years. Now, as commander of the U.S. Second Corps, he helped push the Tunisian campaign to victory. British commanders acknowledged his contribution. Was he getting there? As they would say in Missouri, he fought to beat the band. After victory in Africa, Bradley took the Second Corps into Sicily under General George S. Patton. Plans for the cross-channel assault on France were well underway when General Marshall sent word to Eisenhower. "My choice is Bradley," he told the Supreme Allied Commander, meaning he intended for Bradley to lead the American forces in Operation Overlord. As commanding general of the First Army, Bradley was ashore less than 24 hours after the first Allied units hit the beaches. The battle for Western Europe was to be a soldier's battle, and leading these soldiers was a man who, in the words of General Marshall, was fit for any command in the Army. Just 1 week after D-Day, the Allied positions were linked together in a beachhead 42 miles wide. The next prime objective was the port of Cherbourg. As Bradley's First Army pushed ahead, happy Frenchmen began to breathe the first fresh air of liberation, and the soldiers began to feel welcome. They were a hard nut to crack, those Nazis. They meant to keep the Allies from taking a harbor, a suitable port for bringing supplies ashore at any cost. Nazi commanders now felt the power of Bradley's punch. But once he made up his mind, Bradley moved swiftly, relentlessly. Was he getting there? Following the Battle of Saint-Lô, Bradley took command of the 12th Army Group. 43 divisions were to be deployed under his command, including General Courtney Hodges' First Army, General George Patton's Third Army, General William Simpson's Ninth Army, and General Leonard Giraud's 15th Army. Never the type of general to lead from the rear, Bradley inspected battlefields in person, making his way from place to place in an ordinary jeep. There wasn't an ounce of glamour or conceit in this man. He got the most out of his men by patient goodwill. He knew every division commander by his first name. When an officer performed as expected, he gave him a free hand. When he hesitated, he tried to help him. And when he failed, Bradley did what had to be done. And all respected him, even Patton, Bradley's chief in French North Africa and Sicily, and now his subordinate. In fact, George S. Patton became one of his closest friends. And what of Bradley's relationship with his boss? There was a mutual trust. Stout-hearted and confident of the result was the way the chief described Bradley. Many battles justified Ike's faith in Bradley, but one in particular, the Battle for Saint-Lô and the breakout from the peninsula. It was one of the most decisive battles of Bradley's military career, and Bradley had created it, planned it down to the last detail. Broke the back of the Wehrmacht. There was a breach in the walls of Fortress Europe, and for the Allied armies, the road was open, the road to Paris. The enemy west of Paris was destroyed, and the liberation of France lay only days away. It was determination, Bradley's determination, that spurred the success of the breakout. Now, hopes ran high for a quick end to the war. Paris liberated. Bradley could have gone into Paris on his own, but the quiet man from Missouri was not built like that. He waited for his chief. A liberated nation honored him. Bradley was to receive many decorations and accolades. Still, as someone once said of him, he always behaved as though he were a civilian among men in uniform. Even as Paris celebrated her liberation, something was happening to the Allied drive. Logistics, that age-old problem of supplying a mighty fighting force on the move, had run into difficulties. The advance slowed, lost momentum, and as winter set in, gave way to stalemate. Then, without warning, counterattack. The Battle of the Bulge, the greatest crisis in Bradley's military career. Dark moments, unpredictable moments. In a dying thrust, the Nazis threw back the Allied forces. Even when the enemy advanced to within a few miles of Bradley's headquarters, he refused to move back, reasoning that such a move could destroy confidence. In these trying days, solid proof was needed, even from generals, that you were not a Nazi disguised as an American. With the Battle of the Bulge over, the Rhine soon came into view. There wasn't much more to it after this. Operation Overlord, which had swept a relatively unknown general into great prominence, had blasted asunder the myth of Nazi invulnerability. From the Omaha beachhead to Berlin, a stunned enemy wondered how it could have happened. The answer was personified by a man who had gone from farm boy to four-star by doing what he had always done, by getting there. True to American tradition, the job helped make the man, and the man made history, never once losing his humility. But was there room for a fifth star? With the war behind him, Bradley turned his determined nature toward more pastoral pursuits. But not far from the fairway was busy Washington, and in post-war America, Bradley played an important role in world affairs. In 1948, after 2 years as a Veterans Administrator, Bradley was appointed Army Chief of Staff. In Bradley's characteristic way, he considered this job just another opportunity to serve his country. And America needed him, for a new type of world jitters had set in. The Cold War, a global chess game between the White House and the Kremlin. In 1948, the Russians set out to isolate and starve the people of West Berlin. The Red Army imposed a blockade on all overland transport between Berlin and the West. Industrial paralysis threatened the city, but not for long. The airways were still free, and from the free nations came tons of supplies for the besieged citizens of West Berlin. The airlift broke the blockade. It was America's first victory in the Cold War. This growing tension called for a reassessment of the military objectives of the U.S. and our allies around the world, and once again, Bradley proved the man for the job. He became a globetrotter, a sort of soldier diplomat. Here we see him arriving in West Germany to discuss plans for collective security with member nations of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The story of Omar Bradley would not be complete without mentioning the former Mary Elizabeth Quayle, who married Bradley a year after his graduation from West Point. Having stood by him throughout his career, she was again at his side as Bradley was sworn in as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. As America's top soldier, he represented his country at the first meeting of the Defense Committee of NATO, held in Washington, D.C. And yes, there was room for a fifth star. By act of Congress and the deep respect and admiration of fellow Missourian, President Harry Truman. The former farm boy was now a frequent visitor at the White House, often meeting with the man who, along with his father, epitomized his ideals in life, George C. Marshall, now Secretary of Defense. Bradley was already a regular at Pennsylvania Avenue when a new conflict demanded he spend even more time as consultant to the Commander-in-Chief, the Korean War. Again, he visited war rooms, this time under the banner of the United Nations, guiding not just battlefield tactics, but global military strategy. The fighting raged for 3 years, with Bradley and others performing a delicate balancing act that would allow crucial military goals to be met while avoiding a Third World War. These were precarious times. At stake was global prestige, America's voice in the free world. As in World War II, Bradley helped direct Allied forces close to the battle line. 1952, a classmate from Bradley's academy days, Dwight D. Eisenhower rose to the office of president, playing commander-in-chief to Bradley's chairman. Shortly before leaving active duty, he paid one more visit to the White House, this time to stand with Ike and other members of the West Point class of 1915. After retiring, the former farm boy received what may have been his most apropos accolade. Bradley, West Virginia, on U.S. Route 21 between Beckley and Mount Hope. Speaking to the citizens of his namesake town, he said no boy ever came out of an army camp with any more or any less moral fiber and any more or less courage than he had when he left his family fireside. He had come a long way, this general, from the humble roots of America to a place among the truly great men of history. A remarkable man, a remarkable life. Omar Nelson Bradley, a hero.